Thank you for taking the time to come out to this lunch and learn. We're going to talk about art, JPEGs, communities, squiggly lines, and internet culture. This should be a fun one, so let's get into it. So there's going to be two parts to the presentation here. In part one, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of generative art. I will talk about how blockchains meaningfully advance this type of art and the way that communities are forming around it. I'll talk a little bit about how you can get started with generative art if you want to, and that will be about 3/4 of the presentation. Then in part two, I'll talk about why generative art and what it represents is not just cool, but also important, and how it ties into what we are building at ECO. When I started to put this presentation together, I was planning on it being a 15 to 20 minute easy breezy presentation, but I'm pretty sure that we're going to go longer than 40 minutes. So buckle up. Okay, so what is my background with art? Well, it's pretty much nothing. I have no historical interest or experience in art. I'm a terrible doodler, as you can see by this cat picture that I drew. And I didn't know what makes art great. If you took me to a museum, I would make generic comments, pointing out the direction of the brushstrokes or saying something about the use of color in a painting or something like that. As of today, though, now I've read the book Art 101, and I bought an Apple Pencil so I can draw on my iPad. I haven't gotten any better at drawing, but at least I have the pencil. So you can see that I am the right person to give the presentation that we're talking about here, and now we can really get into it. Generative art is a form of art that is created using a set of rules or algorithms that determine how the artwork is generated. It's technically been around for thousands of years, but culturally, it's a relatively new form of art that has its roots primarily in the 60s and 70s, when computer technology began to become more widely available. The earliest examples of generative art can be traced back to the work of mathematicians and computer scientists like John Whitney and Vera Molnar. These pioneers used computer programming and algorithms to create abstract and geometric designs that were generated by a computer. The output of these algorithms was often printed on paper or film, resulting in works of art that were both precise and unpredictable. You don't have to use a computer to create generative art, but it certainly made it more popular. Now, when I say that generative art uses an algorithm, think of it as one of those image generators you can find online where every time you hit the spacebar, a new version of the image appears. There's some sort of algorithm happening in the background that can construct an image based on certain parameters. Every time you hit space, the algorithm produces a new image in a slightly different way. Most runs of the spacebar press give you something that looks in line with what came before it, but sometimes you get something truly random and amazing. And that's kind of generative art, but we'll see that it goes much deeper. Okay, we have to pause for a second to define what an NFT is, because it's so critical in understanding how generative art as a medium has taken a massive leap forward. So in 2008, Bitcoin introduced us to the idea that you can own something that is digital, that something that lives on the internet can be yours, truly yours, the same way that a $20 bill in your wallet can. That wasn't possible before Bitcoin. If I send someone a PDF, I have the PDF, and now they have the PDF too. There are copies of it. Nobody owns that PDF like it's a piece of property, and that's how most digital things still are today. Bitcoin and blockchains, open, public, transparent ledgers with no intermediaries, allow us to own things that are digital. Now, Bitcoin is money, and money is fungible, which means that each unit is interchangeable. If you buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, it doesn't matter whose Bitcoin you're buying on the other side, because all Bitcoin is pretty much the same. If you hand a $20 bill to someone at 7-Eleven, it doesn't matter whose change you get in return, because all dollars are pretty much the same. An NFT is a crypto token where that is not the case. It is a way for each individual token, even if it's of one common set, to be completely unique. You can think of it kind of like a driver's license. Not all driver's licenses are the same. You can't use mine and I can't use yours. Mine still falls under the greater collection of Hawaii driver's licenses, but the one that I have is uniquely mine. And so, because now we have that ability, you can use that unique token identifier to do a million different things. It can be an access pass, a membership card, a key that unlocks certain things, and so much more. There's so much that you can do when you have a programmatic digital unique token identifier, but we're actually not going to talk about any of them. We're going to talk about the most simple thing that you can do with a unique token, and that is to put a piece of art on it. One of the challenges with generative art historically, and with any digital art that exists today, is establishing the provenance or ownership of the art. For instance, if I send someone a PDF, both of us have it. If you discover a piece of digital art, whether it's from Fiverr or a more renowned artist, there's no genuine way to determine who created the history of that art, and for only one person to be the true owner of that art. There's no indisputable record you get for purchasing the art over simply just saving the image and printing it yourself. In conventional digital art, verifying ownership or history is impossible. Blockchains largely fix this. Every transaction on a blockchain is documented on a distributed ledger, establishing a permanent record of the ownership and history of that piece of art. While not technically the first to make blockchain art, Larva Labs, a duo of two random guys in Canada, ended up revolutionizing art on blockchains. CryptoPunks, launched in June 2017 at the top of the screen here, marked the first serious large-scale attempt to integrate art on the blockchain with its 10,000 image punks collection. Initially free for enthusiasts, these punks, now valued at about 75K, initially got minimal attention. However, certain individuals did take notice. Many influential names in crypto art today were captivated by the potential of art on the blockchain after observing CryptoPunks, even when they held no value. Most of the innovators and galleries that we are going to discuss throughout this presentation drew inspiration directly from CryptoPunks, making them culturally significant in two primary aspects. First, as the foundational piece of art on the blockchain, represented by the Chromie squiggle and the company art blocks in the bottom right. And secondly, as the foundational concept for identity on the blockchain in profile pictures, or PFPs. This has inspired various entities, like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, where the profile picture is also an access pass and membership, influencing the cultural shift in digital identity. CryptoPunks sit at the top of both vectors of these different NFT classes, art and identity. The second innovation by Larva Labs in blockchain art came with autoglyphs on the bottom left. Typically, while one's ownership of an NFT is verifiable on a blockchain, the actual image that the NFT portrays is not usually stored on a blockchain. Instead, the blockchain token might point to an external image that's actually living on a website. So while the NFT token itself is on the blockchain, the image itself is not embedded in the token. This means that if the website fails, the visual representation of the art might be lost. Autoglyphs change this. Larva Labs found a way to embed the algorithm that generates the art image directly onto the Ethereum blockchain, which means that every time the smart contract code is executed or refreshed, the same image regenerates using the code that is present on the Ethereum blockchain. This means that the image is genuinely permanent, that it is independent of external dependencies like web servers and websites, as long as Ethereum exists. The art actually lives on the blockchain itself. When code that creates the image is written into the blockchain, we call it on-chain art. Today, most PFPs are still not on-chain because it's technically challenging, but a lot of art is, because it's a key part of how blockchains elevate generative art. Among the early enthusiasts of CryptoPunks was Eric Calderon. When introduced to CryptoPunks, he had this revelation that NFTs might be the missing piece in realizing the full potential of generative art, which is a medium he had long cared about. Using his background in creative coding and doing physical work with art installations, with the idea of digital ownership in mind, he laid the foundations for Art Blocks. The platform was officially launched in November 2020 with the Genesis project Chromie Squiggles, as showcased here. Art Blocks stands out as the pioneering platform for on-chain generative art. To go backwards for a second, generative art, sometimes referred to as Gen Art, has been part of the art world for around 7 decades. Yet, it's often lacked the respect that other art forms enjoyed. Historically, an artist would craft an algorithm, produce numerous outputs, and cherry pick a few of their favorites that they deemed the best to display or sell. So the artist was essentially just picking the best image that they generated, even if most of them weren't great. However, on-chain generative art, starting with autoglyphs and now becoming mainstream with platforms like Art Blocks, removes the artist's curative powers. When the artwork's generating algorithm resides on the Ethereum blockchain, the art piece itself, the NFT or the art that goes with the NFT for on-chain generative art, only materializes when the NFT is minted for the very first time. So imagine an art generator where every press of the spacebar spawns a new image. With on-chain generative art and made popular by Art Blocks, this spacebar moment happens when someone mints the NFT for the first time. So the art that the buyer gets just for the very first time is generated after they make the purchase, because the mint purchase is the spacebar press. They don't know what art they're going to get, and the artist doesn't know what's going to pop out until after the art is forever cemented on the Ethereum blockchain. So artists can write the code and they can provide potential outputs as teasers, but even the artist themselves remains in the dark about what the full collection of generative art pieces are going to look like, just like the buyer is. When an artist says that they're going to release a collection, neither the artist nor the initial buyers know exactly the output that they are going to get by minting a piece. So artists can cap the total number of creations, which usually goes from about 100 to 1,000, but they relinquish control over the exact outputs that are imprinted on the immutable Ethereum blockchain forever. Now, this elevates generative art to a new level. It's generative art on hard mode. Artists can't just produce a handful of appealing images from running 1,000 of them. Now, the algorithm that they create must be strong enough to consistently generate varied, unique, and captivating artwork. Every piece in a set of hundreds or thousands must be distinctive and resonate with the artist's intent without the artist's ability to curate the final output. Art Blocks, beginning with the Chromie Squiggle, has birthed an authentic platform for this type of art genre, which is leading to a new movement in art. One quick notable feature about on-chain generative art that's very cool is that it is resolution agnostic. Since the artwork is regenerated from the blockchain code every time it's accessed, it adjusts seamlessly to whatever screen the viewer is looking at the image at. This means that as display technologies evolve and screens get 1,000 times better, on-chain generative art will remain perpetually crisp and future-proof. It will always run at whatever resolution it's viewed at, even if screens are 1,000 times better. Okay, now let's take a look at some generative art NFTs to get a sense of how they create a unique sense of community. We'll start with the Chromie Squiggles here, which I understand to most people don't look like much, but after you learn a little bit more about the industry that has come as a direct result of the Chromie Squiggle, it's hard not to love them, and I genuinely think that they are gorgeous. Already here, though, you can kind of see how every squiggle is a little bit different. They have unique shapes, color spreads, characteristics, and traits. If 2 of us own a Chromie Squiggle, we both own something that is uniquely ours. Nobody else in the world can have my squiggle, yet it is also unmistakably part of the larger squiggle collection. It's unique on its own, yet fits in with the larger whole. We, as squiggle enjoyers, start to feel as though we are part of a shared community. And that is what makes this so special. This slide here is just to show the way that certain traits can emerge from an algorithm. Most squiggles look like your top left. They're in this normal shape with this normal color spread, although the exact output of colors will vary depending on what you mint. But you can have these like special occurrences as well that pop up randomly. When you minted a squiggle, you didn't know exactly how it was going to turn out. And so some people get rib squiggles, others bold or slinkies. And even within these characteristics, there are different levels of color spread and shape and things like that. And so these unique kind of rare outlier traits sometimes emerge. And collectors of the art really enjoy seeing these outliers and develop an appreciation for certain traits. And just to show an example here, here is a full spectrum squiggle, which has every color that is possible within the squiggle algorithm showing in this one squiggle. These are beautiful and sell for considerably higher than the floor price. If we go back a few slides, you can see how on the right, not every squiggle has the same color or the exact same shape. And so here we have this full spectrum squiggle with a really like clean aesthetic looking shape as well, almost symmetrical. Now, I've spent a lot of time on squiggles because they've already hit a certain level of cultural relevance and significance in art circles. And just for reference, the floor price, the lowest price you can get a Chromie squiggle right now is about $16,000. So here we have Screens by Thomas Lynn Peterson. And we're starting to get into art by more traditional artists where you are watching this and you're like, okay, that's art. Now, Screens is important to me because it's with this collection that I happened to stumble upon in April 2022 that made me pause and be like, that's interesting. Again, and maybe more clearly this time, you can see how if you own a screen, the art that you own is unique to you. Even if the top left image here and the bottom middle are both the Bauhaus color palette, your image is your own, yet they fit together as part of this broader set. One classic mistake, although I don't know if it's really a mistake, but when I first got into Gen Art, I pull up a collection, I find an image I like and I buy it. But as I mentioned before, one good image in a set of a few hundred does not make a good overall collection. And so the sets that I'm highlighting here are uniformly strong throughout. And to make an algorithm that strong, that has both sufficient variability so that the pieces feel unique, but also that the unique pieces clearly feel as part of a whole, while every piece on its own is aesthetically pleasing with few bad clunkers, is incredibly challenging to do. Here we have Memories of Qilin by Emily G. And first of all, it's gorgeous, inspired by East Asian art and adopting a sort of free-flowing nature of shapes and movement. But when organized like this, you can also see how generative art lends itself to curation and collection. When a set has so many different diverse outputs, you can gravitate towards the traits that speak to you personally the most. And people love to create sets of what they own. They want to collect in sets. And so many people are collecting in sets and they're getting prints and they're putting the works that they own in their homes. And so here I have a couple fidenzas that these are not my fidenzas, let me be clear. I have no fidenzas, but here are some fidenzas by Tyler Hobbs that are hung up on a wall here. And here we have some Meridians by Matt, French last name, I just call him Matt Dessel. He's a very popular artist, and these are Meridians. And you can see how the different outputs really lend themselves to sort of collection and curation here. And the final set that I'll show for now are Ringers by Dmitry Cherniak, which is an exploration of string being wrapped around pegs. And it's a set that highlights the beauty that can be produced from the randomness of an algorithm. With the two images on the right, you can see how completely through randomness, animal shapes were generated as a result of minting the collection. On the bottom right, you have the moose, and you can see how the dark shape looks like the head of a moose. And on the top right, you have the goose, where the negative white space in the middle with the eye and then the little yellow beak poking out forms the shape of a goose. The goose is arguably the most iconic single output of generative art so far. It was owned by the bankrupt fund 3 Arrows Capital and was just sold at a Sotheby's auction for $6.2 million. And so just to note, there's nothing in the algorithm that said create animal likenesses. It was just a result of the inherent randomness that comes from this type of art, where the artist cannot curate the final set of images and the initial minter does not know exactly what they're getting before the image is created. Trying to get to the heart of what's really going on here, we have to address a couple common criticisms that I hear. First is it art if it's from an algorithm? Never mind the fact that we have electronic music that comes from computers, or the fact that it only takes 5 minutes listening to any of these artists talk about their work to know that they would bleed for it, or the fact that throughout art's entire history, people have said that new types of art are not art. The skeptic says that it came from a computer and therefore it's not art. To that, all I can say is that it takes a true artist to take something as cold and robotic as computer code and turn it into something that evokes emotion and feeling inside of you. To take something inhumane and make it humane. This garden monolith on the right here by Zancan is incredibly human. And so, of course, it's art. And if you start to pay close enough attention to it, it's art that reflects the current state of where we're at in the world, where the melding of physical and digital continue to combine. Next is, can't you just right-click save the image? Haha, that was your $6.2 million ringer, but now it's mine. And I never understood this one, or it took me a while, but it's a real sticking point with folks. And the reason has to be mainly because we're talking about something digital. But if I have a print of Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa in my condo, everybody understands that I don't have the real Mona Lisa. That's the same thing as right-click saving the image. Right-click saving doesn't give you the ownership that the NFT is. You just have a print of the image like I do the Mona Lisa. But that actually gets to a deeper point. What makes art valuable is not just the image itself. It's not just about the art, it's about the artist. The artist with a legacy and history producing the great art is what makes so many of these legendary pieces valuable. And so what right-click save folks don't understand is that there are real communities and followings being built around these artists. Valuable NFT art is about the artist just as much as it is about the image. And so what's amazing with these art communities that have formed is that art is becoming social in a way that has never happened before. I can go into the Art Blocks Discord and talk with hundreds of other people that own screens by Thomas Lynn Peterson. I can talk to them about the new art that they're finding. We follow Thomas on his journey as an artist and the new things that he produces, and we can all connect to each other through shared ownership of a work, no matter where we are in the world. And that is happening everywhere. Unlike contemporary art, where artists are known for shock value and for work that doesn't make any sense when you first see it, generative art is putting the art back in art. And part of what's so wonderful about this is that in a world of crypto speculation, where everything is FOMO and gambling, so much of the art scene is exactly the opposite. Yes, folks are investing in some of these art pieces, expecting them to go up in value, but even those people are buying many low-cost works for no other reason than that they love the art. Blockchain art is far less speculative driven than almost any other area of crypto, and it's incredibly refreshing. And on top of all of this, all of these art communities and this art culture truly emerged following the launch of Art Blocks and the Chromie Squiggle. And that is part of why they are so beloved, and it is why I customized another hat to get the Art Blocks logo on it. So moving on to the next slide. Oh my God, how did all of these crypto dick butts get in here? I'm so sorry, guys. I thought I was going to erase this slide. I must have not gotten rid of the slide. Oh, geez, the dick butts. I'm sorry, guys. We're moving along. Okay, ignore that last slide. So part of the way that art communities are expanding is through platforms like Deca.art. There are platforms out there that allow you to display all of your NFT art in an easy to follow gallery and discover art just like it. And so what people do is they go out and they discover new art and they put it in their galleries and they share it online. And people like me click on those galleries and they click on the artworks that are in there and they look at the associated artists. They see the art that they might want to get and they discover new art. And so the beauty of this social art movement with NFT art is that unlike modern art today, which is dominated by gatekeepers, NFT art is truly global and permissionless. Access is completely open. And so I'm sharing here a number of galleries that you guys can take a look at after the presentation. You can go in and you can see how folks are curating their art. And you can click on the links to other platforms where you can see who these galleries are following, and you can go look at more galleries. And this is all just individuals on Twitter and on Discord and things like that, and just start to get familiar with how cool this all is. The top gallery here, the Cove Gallery, is mine. And I'm okay sharing it because it's what I would call my low value gallery, where almost all the art that I bought is for $20 or less. Even though I like to remain private, I want to share this so you can see what it looks like if you just want to dabble in some low cost art collection a little bit. It may not be much, but I'm proud of my gallery. Meanwhile, the other galleries are spectacular, and so just soak them in. So I have a slide in here about if you want to buy generative art, and I mainly have this in here to stop you from spending a lot of money on any of this stuff. Don't rush out just because of my presentation and buy $5,000 on a piece of art. Because NFTs are non-fungible, they are much harder to sell than a normal coin. If I want to sell Bitcoin on Coinbase, I can sell it in a second because it goes into this big pool of buyers and sellers. The buyer doesn't need to know whose Bitcoin they're buying, and so the combined liquidity is enormous. NFTs don't work that way. If I want to sell an NFT, someone needs to pick my specific NFT to buy, and that is not often a given. When you buy a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum and the price goes down, you can sell it at any time for a loss. With NFTs, you cannot sell it unless someone specifically wants your NFT. So if you buy something, you must be prepared to never sell it. With that out of the way, the best place to check out low cost quality art is on FX Hash, which is on Tezos, so Tezos blockchain. Now, I'm not telling you to invest in Tezos. I do not invest in any Tezos. There's basically nothing interesting happening on Tezos besides art, but the fact remains that FX Hash has emerged as a genuinely popular generative art platform, and it's the best place that you can find affordable, accessible, great art. And on FX Hash, you can even buy the art with a credit card, although you do need a wallet still. If you want to be an investor, I don't have too much helpful information to share. I would say don't do it. The only thing that I would say is what artists might be more culturally relevant in 10 years than they are today. But being a collector is a lot of fun. If you go exploring FX Hash later, feel free to shoot me a message if you need help setting up a wallet or something. I love being bothered to chat about this kind of thing. Okay, so we're about 3/4 of the way done overall. And that is like the end of the art specific portion of the Lunch and Learn. If I've done my job right, you now think that generative art on the blockchain, is at least a little bit cool. So it's interesting, but who cares, right? Like, why does it actually matter? Okay. Take a quick pause here to take a sip of water. Okay. So this stuff is cool, but why does it actually matter? Why is this important? I was listening to a podcast at the start of the year, and one of the speakers casually said a sentence that was something like, "This is art's internet moment." And that quote stuck with me. I found it interesting. What is an internet moment? And so I've been thinking about it more, and I think that I've got something for it there. Most of us think that the internet is this static thing, that we have the internet now and we just go online to the internet. But that's not quite right. Really, the internet itself is still evolving. Really, what we think of as the internet today is just one aspect of our lives, mainly communication, that has had its internet moment. The internet is not this static thing that we have, but instead, it's that communication has had an internet moment. What does that mean? How does something go online to begin with? If you think that communication is the key breakthrough of the internet so far, then we can look to how communication itself went online. So going online happens in stages. It doesn't just happen overnight. There are three stages to the evolution of communication. First, you disregard it. Classic. Let's use the New York Times as an example. Mid 90s, late 90s, whenever, you have your first internet blogs getting popular, people posting their own stories on the internet, and an institution like the New York Times sees it and they mostly disregard it. No big deal. It's not worth investing time, effort, and money into. Then, the second stage, you recognize that there is some value to the new technology or medium, and you try to bring what is happening offline online. In the case of something like the New York Times, that means that you take the written articles that go in the offline paper every day and you try and put those articles online. You take the offline paper and you try and bring it online so more people can see it. This is where crypto is mostly at now, for the most part, by the way. We're figuring out how to do things that we can already do offline, like traditional banking and finance, online, on chain, but we'll get there. Finally, the third stage of going online is when you go above and beyond the old medium to do things that are now only possible with the new medium, that are only possible online, where you have internet native means of communication. For the New York Times, a legacy institution, that means that you can have far more articles online than you can ever fit in a newspaper. You can have games and other things that you can't get offline. But for other mechanisms of communication, it means that they only exist online. Email, Discord, Slack, Zoom, iMessage, World of Warcraft, and a million other ways of communication only exist online. So you start offline, then you move to trying to mimic the offline online, and then you go to online only. And that is what the internet is today. So to recap, what we think of as the internet is really just one aspect of life that has had its internet moment. Don't think of the internet as this static thing that we already have, and start thinking about how different parts of society are having their internet moments today. So far, I would say the internet is mainly communication that has had its internet moment, but the internet is not done yet. It's just beginning. And many more parts of our lives are just starting to have their internet moments. Starting in 2008, with the birth of Bitcoin, money is having its internet moment as well. For the first time, money went online, where you could now transact with someone digitally without any trusted intermediary or middleman, where transacting value digitally was more like handing a dollar bill to someone than the Apple Pay, Visa, bank system of layers that we have today. But most people weren't ready for that then. Most people are still not ready, but it's there. Even if it hasn't integrated into our day-to-day lives yet, money had its first internet moment with Bitcoin. It doesn't have to settle offline, it lives on the internet. And now you can transact with anyone across the globe in an instant. But it doesn't quite connect with us yet because you can't do things with the internet money the way that you can with US dollars. And we'll come back to that because first, right now, art is having its internet moment and it's connecting with tens of thousands of people across the world today. And you're taking an industry that was as offline as it could be, physical pieces of art confined to galleries and the mantelpieces of the wealthy folks, distribution controlled by a small circle of people in galleries, and suddenly you completely open it up. You can see exactly what address owns any piece of art, and folks around the world can collect, share, and bond over these works of art and these artists. And anybody around the world can produce art that other people can find and see. So art is becoming more social globally than at any other point in history before it. And I would wager that we are on the precipice of a global art revolution, where art will become more culturally relevant, broadly distributed and collected, and just generally popular because of the ease of accessibility than has ever happened before in history. Generative art is likely to be the defining art movement of our generation. The same way that there was Impressionism and Cubism and contemporary art, we are shifting into the genre of generativism. And so art is at the beginning of its internet moment now. And it took me realizing this about art to fit more pieces together about crypto and society as a whole. So the final piece of this is about how it's related to anything that we're doing at Eco. And the important thing to understand here is, again, more and more parts of our lives are on the precipice of having their internet moments. And crypto, as the economy of the internet, is the realization of that idea. So the same way that communication had its internet moment and art is having it now, we are going to see more and more parts of our lives go online, where things that we do either in the physical world or in the intermediate way, where we do things online that settle in the physical world, start to live online natively. And so through crypto, we are seeing the early stages of things like natively digital bank type of things, lending platforms, ways to invest and trade, share art, gaming, social media, and so much more, working through the stages of coming fully online. Right now, crypto is sort of in that stage 2 of going online, where folks are trying to replicate the way we do things today, but on chain. The same kind of systems we have today, but in a way that is completely borderless, accessible to everyone, open and transparent, and permissionless. And that in itself is important. No matter who you are, where you live, what your race, gender, or religion is, if you have an internet connection, you can tap into a global shared economy. But what hasn't been fully unlocked yet is that stage 3, where because we're going online, we can do things that are not even conceivable in the current physical world. Just like with communication, where we can do things like Zoom, which wasn't possible in that middle stage. And so the construct here that may help to grasp crypto a little bit if you struggle with it is the idea of the internet's economy, that just like the US or China, the internet itself is a country, and that crypto is the native economy of the internet country. It may not have farming and manufacturing and things like that, but it can have a whole lot of services in that economy. And so the same way that you hear politicians talk about losing jobs to China or something like that, the same is true of the internet itself, where the internet will have its own economy, its own financial services, its own games and art and social platforms that live natively on the internet, executing on code and never settling offline. And that is crypto. And that country, the economy of the internet country itself, is just developing. It's doing it fast, and it may well become a global superpower. And so the internet economy is going to have its own culture. And so it all fits together. And so the art that is emerging through the generative art world is just as much a part of the broader internet movement as DeFi is, and what Eco is doing through the Eco currency. And to conclude this presentation today, I will say one more thing. If we want Eco to be the currency of the internet economy, then we need to show that we stand shoulder to shoulder with the other pioneers of this industry, and that we understand and represent the culture that is emerging as this internet economy gets built. And so to do that, I am proposing here at the end of this presentation that we buy a Chromie Squiggle for our corporate treasury at Eco. We should show that we are culturally aligned with the movement that we want to be a leader in. And if you agree with that, that Eco should have a Chromie Squiggle, even in the era of careful considered spend, make sure you let Jeff C know in the chat or on Slack. And so that's the presentation. That's all I've got here. Thank you for taking the time. If you ever want to chat about any of this stuff or want to know how to get started, shoot me a message and I'd love to chat about it. So that is the end, team.